former Democratic congressman and current congressional candidate for the 33rd Congressional District here in North Texas, Colin Allred. Thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack.
You bet. So, got to start with the video that you posted last week that went viral. Your sharp criticism of U.S. Senate candidate James Talarico after he's accused of calling you, quote, a mediocre black man. Why was it important for you to put out a statement like that, go on video, and really make that public?
Well, I think it's a little bit uncommon for me, but it was also something I felt strongly about, that there's a level of disrespect inherent in the comment that I found to be unacceptable. But also, as I said in the video, I was speaking to young people who are looking at this and who may someday think that they want to run for office or they want to be leaders in their community, and that they may feel like they have to jump through twice as many hoops or be twice as good and have their accomplishments diminished in that way. And to me, that's unacceptable. I wanted them to know that they can be valuable and that they can bring their skills and their experience to the table, and they don't have to feel like they have to be twice as good, and that they will be somebody who has a real imprint on what we're doing.
You seemed in that video really ticked off.
Well, I think it was an inappropriate thing to say. And I think that, of course, there's the racial element to it. There's also a level of disrespect that I found to be unacceptable in somebody who should know better. And I thought that it was something that needed to be responded to. And I think sometimes you have to remind people that there's certain standards that have to be upheld, and that if you do certain things, that you're going to get a response. And that's what I was doing.
So, as you know, Representative Talarico issued a statement that said, quote, "This is a mischaracterization of a private conversation. In my praise of Congresswoman Crockett, I describe Congressman Allred's method of campaigning as mediocre, but his life and service are not. I would never attack him on the basis of race." How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that he did not deny saying what was said. And I spoke with the young woman who it was said to, and I believe her. And she was not a supporter of mine. She's a supporter of his. We should remember that. And it would not have been upsetting to her to hear a commentary on a campaign. It was the formulation of the race, and also talking specifically about me, that was what upset her. And it was somebody who felt very strongly that she had to come forward and tell people that she had this experience. And I've had conversations like that left you shocked afterwards, and you feel like this is unacceptable. People shouldn't be able to say these things, especially about black men or anybody really in our society.
So you don't believe Talarico?
Well, I think that even in that statement, he didn't deny saying it. And I think that there needs to be an apology either way. There needs to be an apology and some attempt to move forward, to recognize that there are certain things that, whether the full intent was intended or not, that came across in a way that was offensive to that young woman and to many others.
And did he call you afterwards? Did you call him afterwards? Any attempt for either of you to reach out?
We spoke on the phone, and I offered him a chance to apologize, and he declined to do that.
So he didn't apologize?
That's right.
Did that surprise you?
It is surprising. I think that's the easiest thing to do in this situation, is to say, listen, whatever you can even say, I feel like that's not how the conversation went. But either way, I apologize for the offense that was given, which I think is what would have been the right thing to do.
Did he call you or you call him?
It was both. Yeah, it was back and forth.
And so how did you leave it?
Well, we left it there. I said, well, I think there needs to be an apology.
And on Saturday at the Chorizo Menudo breakfast in Dallas, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Talarico came a little later, and he was asked about this.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that.
Yes, he was asked about this dust-up between you two. And he said, the job of a leader is to try to lower the temperature, try to remind us all we are on the same team. He went on to say, we need to keep our eyes on the prize, uniting as Democrats to beat Republicans in November.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
When you say something offensive, it's your responsibility to apologize. That's also the job of a leader, right? It's to try and acknowledge any harm that's been done and to try and calm the waters in that regard. Saying something offensive and then expecting everyone else to just move on is, to me, a hallmark of somebody who's not leading but actually following.
And did you think before you posted the video, well, maybe I ought to just call him? Talk to me a little about that decision.
Well, listen, I think that we're in an age where sometimes I will respond to things that I think need to have a public response, and that's how I approached it.
I also wanted to ask you about some of the blowback that we've seen that you've gotten. People upset about you going forward, going public, and people criticizing you for dividing the party. What do you say to that?
Well, listen, like I said, I knew that responding to it was going to be something that some people would not like. I'm sorry that many people might not have had the experience of being in this kind of a role where you can have a racial comment made about you and you want to respond to it and say, hey, not only should you not say this, but to people out there watching, don't worry, whenever you step forward, there's going to be people who are going to support you. You won't have to put up with these kinds of things. I think that was a pretty measured overall approach to it. And so, I did what I thought needed to be done. And I think we have to move forward now.
How concerned are you that it will hurt your current campaign for the 33rd Congressional District?
Well, I'm not concerned at all. I know Dallas, and Dallas knows me well. And this is something, a little back and forth that, I've gone to many things since then. Most folks, aren't even aware of what's going on with these. I think some of these things are hyper online in some cases. And I know this spreads beyond that, but I think most folks are worried about themselves, their families, who's looking out for them. I've got a record of doing that. That's what I'll keep doing.
One other question. I saw comments online of people wondering aloud if, this was coordinated somehow with Congresswoman Crockett's current U.S. Senate campaign. Obviously, she's running against Talerico.
Is it so hard to believe that something offensive was said and that somebody wanted to respond to it? I think that's what folks have to really realize, right? There's no need to coordinate something like that. I would never want to have to, be responding to something like that. I think it's unfortunate that he said that, and that's what we should keep the focus on, is that the harm here is what was said, and that was basically admitted to in that statement. And that's the harm that was done, not the act of responding to it or saying that it was inappropriate.
So let's talk about your campaign. You are running against 3 others for the 33rd Congressional District in the Democratic primary, including Julie Johnson, who succeeded you in office. What is your message to Democratic primary voters as to why they should select you over her and the others?
Well, I know this district well. It's one that I was born and raised in, and it's one that I've already served in some capacity. I've delivered $135 million in federal funds for this district before I even represented it. I have a record in Congress of being someone who really got a lot of things done and provided great services to my constituents. But I think this is also a time where we have to have somebody who knows how to stand up to this administration. And I've certainly shown that I'll do that. Even when I was in a incredibly, as you know, politically tough district, I was always willing to speak out. I was certainly willing to stand up and fight on January 6th against that mob that was trying to overturn an election. And I'll stand up to this administration now in a form that I think has taken on, is completely out of control. I think that's what we're going to have.
Do you think you're going to avoid a runoff, or do you think you're going to go into a runoff?
Yeah, I'm not in the business of predictions. I want everybody to vote, and I would love to have everyone in this district's vote. And I think that I have a record of service, but also one of serving with dignity, that in 6 years, I never took a dime of corporate PAC money because I didn't want anyone to think that I was serving someone else other than them, that in 6 years, I never traded a single stock. Representative Johnson has only been in office for a little bit over a year. She has taken a very different approach, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate PAC money, being one of the top stock traders in the entire country, including trading on stocks on issues that were before the Congress and that she made profits on. I find that to be inappropriate. I think it's not how you should serve your community.
Why not?
Well, the stock trading thing has always bothered me. I think that when I was in office, I felt like it was unethical, that we had access to insider information. It was legal when I was there to trade stocks, but I didn't want to. But since leaving office and going around talking to folks around the state and talking to particularly working people about the corruption of this administration, they recognize that. They know about the jet, they know about the ballroom, they know this is a corrupt administration, but then they'll often say, well, what about the corruption in Congress? And I think there's a broader feeling of overall that everybody must be corrupt, that I think people like Donald Trump take advantage of. And so part of standing up to him is also cleaning up our house and saying, we're not going to allow this in our house either, because we're going to make sure that you know that we're serving you. And coming out of something like this, a period like we're in, we have to have dramatic changes. And one of them is to say that some of these unethical approaches that have been allowed should no longer be.
When I spoke with Congresswoman Johnson about it, she said that she called it a disingenuous attack because she said, you know, she recognized this as an issue last year. She signed on to the bill resolution to ban individual stock trades by members of Congress, and she divested. And now she's being criticized for divesting it. What do you say to that?
Unfortunately, it's just not true. She was buying stock as recently as last November. And so this claim that she was divesting is not true. She has traded and sold and has been one of the top stock traders in the entire Congress, over $4 million in trades. This is not just divesting, right? And this is something that should not have been new to her. She was a state representative before she ran for Congress. After she won her primary, she had a number of months to try and prepare for being in the Congress. So she had plenty of notice of what she was going into. I think that she just knows that she got caught doing this, and then she has changed her approach to it. And to me, that's not acceptable.
She also accused you of voting with Republicans, allowing them to investigate nonprofits and allowing mass deportations without due process, even women who were victims of sexual assault. What do you say to that?
That's just not true. But also, she's talking about votes that were taken during the Biden administration. This is a very different administration with a very different approach to immigration enforcement and to immigration as a whole. And so to compare the two is really disingenuous and something that folks should recognize. There are many things that I think and approaches that I would never even consider under a Trump administration, knowing the abuse of power that they've taken and what they've done with ICE in particular and the slush fund that it's received, the lowering of the standards for officers in ICE, and the way that it's not being adhering to the Constitution or to our values. There are many things that would change under this administration, but I haven't been in office under this administration in this second term. Ms. Johnson has, and she's chosen to spend that time trading stocks on issues like Palantir, which is a company that's used by ICE and its surveillance technology. She purchased it a week after she was sworn in. She sold it a few months later at 150% profit. That was her decision. That to me is not, looking out for the people she's supposed to be serving.
So did you vote or not during the Biden administration on, allowing these nonprofits to be investigating or having mass deportations without?
Well, there was no mass deportation vote during the Biden administration. I think the nonprofit issue was around terrorism, and if you had been credibly accused of terrorism, that you could have your nonprofit status stripped. I think that's something that many people, would see as reasonable. But we can look at that through a different lens with a different administration, of course, and say, well, to this administration, maybe we need to be reeling in some of these things. But it's a little disingenuous to talk about it as if it happened now when it happened during President Biden's term.
A lot of Democrats believe ICE should be abolished. Where are you on that?
I think we need to have an overhaul. And I think that what they've done with ICE has made it into the largest police force in the world, really one of the best funded militaries in the entire world. It's given it $170 billion for ICE and for these detention centers that many of them are here in Texas, to do things that I think are completely inconsistent with the law, the Constitution, or the mission of trying to actually have real immigration enforcement. It's stunts, it's violence, it's terrorizing communities, it's tearing apart communities. My family's from the Valley in Brownsville, Texas. The last time I was there, the level of fear that I felt there is something I've never felt in my entire life going to the Valley. This is not how people should feel in this country. We can have immigration enforcement consistent with our values. We can do it in a way that treats people the way that we think that we know they should be treated, but also so the whole world can see us as an example of how to run an immigration system. This is not it. This is a shame on our country. It's going to be a dark mark on our history.
And as far as the government may shut down over this issue, the funding of the DHS, and do you think this is a fight worth having? Do you think the Democrats should force a shutdown over DHS funding?
Well, I think you can look at it one of two ways. You can say the Democrats are forcing a shutdown, or you can say the Republicans know they need Democratic votes to try and advance this budget, and they're not willing to negotiate, right? If you want my vote on an issue, and I think that particularly an agency is being misrun, it's out of control and needs to be reined in, then I'm going to have certain conditions that I need for you to get my vote. And so that's not the Democrats shutting down that part of the government. To me, that's the Republicans saying we won't negotiate for your vote, but we demand it anyway. And that's not how anything should work. But I think also what we're seeing is that the country is demanding this, that our state is demanding this, this community is demanding this. This is not what anyone voted for. I think people wanted to have maybe less chaos at the border. They wanted to have lower costs when they went to the grocery store. They were maybe hoping that Trump meant it when he said that they'd go back to the economy they remembered, pre-COVID. But this is not what they wanted. And I think we're seeing that every single day. We all have within us a certain amount of training as Americans of what freedom looks like and what individual liberty looks like and how you should be treated by your government. And we see these videos and we see what's happening and we instinctively know that this is not who we are. And so that to me is what is causing this. And so we have to stand up and fight against.
Affordability. If you get back into Congress, what legislation would you try to pass to make costs go down for working people?
Well, I do think there's going to be some bipartisan consensus around some of this. But to me, it's the levers that I know we can pull that make it easier to stay in the middle class or to get in the middle class. And those are pretty simple, and they're what every family talks about every weeknight. It's housing, it's the cost of education, it's the cost of healthcare, it's the cost of groceries, but it's the opportunity to get into these things and relieving the stress that so many working families feel right now, that they're working harder and harder for less, that they're spending less time with their kids, that they have less free time, but they still feel like they're not getting ahead, right? And so that to me, we have to shift our priorities around working people in every single area. One in particular I'm always been passionate about is access to housing. I was in the Obama administration for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. My mom rented a house for 20 years here in Dallas that I helped her buy when I was in the NFL. But you shouldn't have to have a son in the NFL to be able to buy a house. Her issue was the down payment and getting over that hurdle. Helping first-time home buyers with down payment assistance is the kind of thing that we can do to get folks off the path and off the treadmill of renting into home ownership and building wealth. That's one of many things that we do in addition to childcare, access to affordable health care that I think will make a huge difference for working families.
Just want to ask you briefly about some foreign policy issues. Should the U.S. bomb Iran again, given the reports that we've seen where the Ayatollah's regime is killing their own citizens?
It's a difficult one because we have taken action in the past when repressive governments were attacking their citizens. If you remember in Libya, for example, they took out Gaddafi's military and then Gaddafi was removed. We've seen Libya become a chaotic state and one that is a home for terror and that is completely unstable. And so you always have to wonder what would come next, right? And as we work towards trying to hold the Iranians accountable for humanitarian violations, for their support for terrorism around the world, their ballistic missile program, their atomic program, as we're working towards that, we have to also understand what the power bases are in Iran and what would come afterwards would not necessarily be a better government for us to be dealing with. And that it may be better for us to find other ways to support democracy growth, civic engagement, and the growth of a domestic Iranian opposition that can actually govern and step in and restore power to the people of Iran. And that to me is the balance that we have to strike. If there are targeted strikes that can prevent the loss of life, then you might want to consider that. But if the overall goal here is to just use violence to try and see if we can have regime change, to me, we've seen that play out, and it's not always played out well.
In Gaza, do you support the U.S. international plan and the effort to force Hamas to de-arm and totally disarm itself?
Yeah, I think it's significant that we should say that many of the Arab states have signed on to this and are pushing for this as well, and that it seems to be a truly regional attempt to try and remove Hamas from a position of stranglehold over Gaza and really some parts of the West Bank as well. And to me, that's a prerequisite for what I think has to be the ultimate endpoint, which is a Palestinian state. And we know that that can't be a state that has Hamas in it. The last time they had an election, Hamas killed all of their rivals, and we're throwing them off of buildings and things like that. And so you can't have an election under conditions like that, and you can't form a state under conditions like that. I'm glad that there's a ceasefire. I think that what we have to do as the United States is play a much more active role in dealing with the humanitarian crisis, which is still ongoing in Gaza, and also speak to our allies in Israel about their activities in the West Bank and the continuing growth of settlements. Is a real concern to me that is foreclosing the option in some cases of a two-state solution, because then if the West Bank continues to be encroached upon and encroached upon, then there'll be less and less and less. And so we have a lot to do here, but, and I've said this before, I think there is an opportunity. As dark as these days have been in that region, it has kind of rekindled the conversation around two states and why that's so necessary in a way that had gotten kind of stuck for the last couple of decades. And so we also have an opportunity to push here, and not just as the United States, but with Arab allies in the region, and try and make sure we get to the right end goal, which should be a stable, democratic Jewish state in Israel next to an independent and free Palestinian state.
Last question, and that is on the U.S. capturing Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela. Did you support that, oppose that, and what do you want to see happen next in Venezuela?
I opposed it for many reasons. I think it looks even worse afterwards, seeing that the intention was not to try and, have elections in Venezuela, not to try and, see the opposition parties have access to the government, but just to leave the regime in place, and just to take out somebody who you individually don't like, but to leave the corrupt machine that he led in place. That doesn't make any sense to me. And also to frame this all as that we're just going to take, this country's oil. That's outrageous on many, many levels. That's not what the United States does. But also, we have adversaries around the world who are watching. And when we do things like this, when we say, this leader, we're going to charge them with a crime, we're going to take them out, we're going to take their natural resources in their country, and then the Chinese see that in relation to Taiwan and some of their other goals. Certainly the Russians see that with what they're doing in Ukraine, but also what they may do in the other Balkan states around them. And so we've been the linchpin of a worldview that says you cannot just attack other countries, take their resources, remove their leaders if you don't like them, that there are processes and there are ways you have to go about doing these things. When we pull that out, and when we're no longer doing that, the whole system has a chance of falling apart. And we may see even more violence around the world because of it. And so I think it was the wrong thing to do, even though Maduro is a terrible person who should never have been in power, and who I worked when I was in Congress to try and support the opposition too.
Former Congressman and current congressional candidate, Colin Allred. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jack.
We appreciate it.